Welcome back to Spirit Squared. I'm Andrew Darrington, your host. So, Spirit Squared, we're in episode 9, and we're here with a new guest and a great topic, a very, very important topic. I just want to remind everybody, Spirit Squared, we're talking about a spirit. So, it could be anything, wine, it could be tequila, it could be whiskey, whatever it is. We do like to share that on our podcast. And the spirit of the individual that we have, our guests, we've had some great guests in the 8 episodes we've had, anywhere from somebody who's an expert in distilleries. We've also had people that were intricate in the medical industry. So we've had some great guests on, and now we're going into a 2-part series of human trafficking. Looking very, very forward to some of the information we're going to get tonight. I'm going to pour my first pour. This is Don Fuano. I went there this last week in Guadalajara, just outside of Guadalajara, and visited their distillery. Super nice distillery, very good people. I'm having their Blanco Fuerte. I also want to rep Arete. Great guys, super fun guys, and good people to know. If you ever have an opportunity to go to Guadalajara and get over to tequila, you definitely want to do that. Great people, great hospitality, fun time. So our guest tonight is Gena Bohl. She is an abuse prevention and anti-trafficking specialist. She's also the founder of Stunningly Strong Beauty, correct?
Correct. Yes.
I get it all. I get that's a mouthful.
You got it all. Yeah.
Okay.
Good job.
For you guys that don't know, I've known Gena for almost 20 years now. Yep. I think the first time we met was in a little farmhouse in Oklahoma.
Yeah, definitely. Little farmhouse in Oklahoma.
Right.
Yes.
So we called them Granny and Gramps.
Yep.
And you had a different name for them.
Yeah, we called them Nana and Papa.
That's right. Well, Nana's still here, but Papa, he left us. But I mean, that's the first time I met you. You gave me a big cup of coffee. We had a lot of fun times, ate too many sweets. But when I created this podcast, you were one of the first people that I thought about because of the importance of the things that you do. I'm so thankful that you're able to come on and talk to us about this very, very important subject matter. So let's start with, you were in media and broadcast some years ago. That's kind of how you got a foothold into what you're doing now, right?
Yes. And first, just let me say thanks so much for thinking of me and asking me to be on here. Super, super honored to be a part of this and to be able to share this message, as well. But yes, I started out in media and broadcast. That's really what my background was in. And we were living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at the time, and Hurricane Katrina came through. And first hurricane that I'd ever experienced, because I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and we just knew to look for blizzards and ice. And so Katrina happened, and worked relief efforts for Katrina. And from there stemmed this whole conversation a couple of years later, where the media started to pick up on these stories of people that were being trafficked from Katrina across state lines. And the way it happened is families, obviously, during that time were devastated. They were separated when the levees broke. I mean, it was just mass chaos in New Orleans. And you're from the state, so right around that area, and it was insane, the amount of just devastation and families that were separated and people that were misplaced. And so natural disaster, anything like that, is going to bring with it just the lowest of low humanity. And there were people that actually dressed up as FEMA workers and promised other family members, we found your family, they're in a shelter here. There were people that came in, and really what broke the story is this huge labor trafficking thing where people were promised jobs, and then they were literally kept in these horrible trailers. Their shoes were taken away from them at night, and they were forced into, labor trafficking. And so these stories broke, and all of a sudden people started going, oh, this doesn't just happen overseas. This happens here in the United States of America. And where we were, this happens right here in our backyard. And so that's kind of what swung that door open for me to start to be able to dip my toes into this realm. And then I just got sucked in and it became my passion. And I live to educate and to help with the prevention side of it, and also for victim identification and survivors. That's
Sure.
the heartbeat of everything, is the survivors.
Right. So there's a time period between, so Katrina was 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And it was insane. My mom and dad were down there during that time. Of course, my mom evacuated, my dad evacuates. My dad works for the railroad, so he's like one of the first people that are able to come back. Saw some crazy stuff. People were, acting like we're in a third world country. And I can only imagine the fallout to that. So we have this problem. It's identified, the trafficking problem I'm referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And so a task force is created, right?
Yes.
But it's a pretty good amount of time after that, right?
Correct. So Katrina happens in 2005, and I didn't actually really get involved until right about 2007. Okay. So it was a couple of years after that stuff started to be brought to light. And a friend of ours had asked us, and it's so funny, I tell this story because I've been in nonprofits where it's anti-human trafficking, and it's cute because I remember I was in a room full of interns, and they were all going around talking about how, oh, I saw this movie, or I just had this really great experience, and I went overseas and I want to come back and I want to fight this. And I was like, that's great. I'm like, my husband and I made a video, but not that kind of video that you guys may be thinking about. We were just really commissioned to work with an organization called A21 to help them kind of start to get the word out about what trafficking was at that time. They had just started, and it's what we called bumper videos. So literally just these 30-second, 60-second pieces that would be played before the founder would come up and talk about it. However, the only thing that I had to go on to really be able to write the script and to help produce it was what the UN had about human trafficking. And I'm talking pages like this thick, and all of the legal ease and speak that you could possibly think of. And so trying to dig in, and I read every article that they had within this, trafficking against persons whole document that came out, and highlighted stuff, and really started to go, wow, if you're trafficked from a foreign country into the United States and that's found out, you have a ton of resources. You get visas, you get protection, you're given housing like crazy. But if you're trafficked in the United States, and at that time, trafficking was considered being taken across state lines. So laws have changed since then. But at that time, if you were trafficked across state lines, it was harder to prove. And if you were trafficked within your own area, you pretty much just got the stamp of prostitute. And that was it. And so you're arrested, put in jail for the night, you have a criminal record. And so really starting to see the discrepancies between the domestic victims and the foreign victims. So I saw that just from the way that those laws first read, and thank goodness they've changed a lot, since 2007. And then from there, from that video, just something struck me, and I had a friend call me and say, hey, there's a nonprofit, they're looking for somebody to do media communications and to really get out in the community and bring awareness. Are you interested? And I said, sign me up. And they were like, great. And then they called me back later and like, by the way, your task force meeting is tomorrow. And I was like, I did not sign up for a task force. I'm sorry. I just want to talk to the press and go educate people. What are you talking about? And they were like, be at the courthouse at this time, at this time. And so I literally, I think that night I prayed that I would have a heart attack. So that way I didn't have to go to this thing, or that the house would flood, or maybe an alligator would just be randomly in the driveway and I couldn't get out. And I mean, none of those things happened. I was like, all right, great. So I went scared to death. I walked in, and I mean, it's like the DA is there. There's medical and EMT people that are there. There's detectives. There's prosecutors. I mean,
Uh,
I'm just, and I walk in, and there's other like non-government organizations that are there that are doing these massive, huge things. And I walk in, and I'm just like, hi. And I sat down. I was lost at first. I didn't know what was going on. Um, and I came home and I told my husband, I said, I quit. And he's like, you can't quit. He's like, you already quit your other job. You need this job because we need the income. You can't quit.
right.
Um, and so the first 6 weeks was a huge learning curve. But once I stopped feeling like I was treading in water and actually started to feel like I was swimming, that's when things really started to go. And I realized like it's not as overwhelming and huge as what I thought it was going to be, because there were so many people that were involved in that task force, and we were working together in our own lanes to help combat this issue that, human trafficking is.
Yeah. So I will get to your transition to Texas here pretty soon, but I want to talk about, because the work I'm sure is very similar in your domestic outreach and like trying to find individuals that have been trafficked. What is that? Stings are one thing. Like we
Mm-hmm.
understand what that is. We've seen the sitcoms, or the shows
Right.
where the syndicated shows where they go in and they bust the door down and all that good stuff. But you're doing the work prior to that. You're
Yes.
talking to the people on the streets. You're talking
Mm-hmm.
to the person maybe that you've identified through your skill set, your training and stuff. Talk to us about some of the things that you've done prior to the glamour part of what we see.
Right. So a lot of people, they automatically hear anti-trafficking and task force or nonprofit, and they go to Liam Neeson,
Right.
very special set of skills, and it's taken. And I'm going to be real honest. I felt more like Mr. Bean, with like my little like nerdy self out there. And it is not, and it's not an hour long. I think TV has, or 2 hours for the movies, it's a long process. So in order to identify victims, first of all, we have to know, where they are. And one of the things that people will a lot of times think about human trafficking is that it involves like kidnapping or physically forcing someone into a situation. And what they don't realize is that grooming is a huge part of it. So one of the things that I like to focus on is that prevention and what does grooming look like, and going in and being able to identify that person is grooming this entire community, because it's not just this. I don't even know how to explain it other than there's just this idea that it is like Taken, where girls are hiding under beds and people are pulling them out. Or if you went and watched the last movie, Sound of Freedom, where it's that. And yes, it can be the modeling things, but really what it is it's a pimp who's willing to invest and know that they're going to get an ROI on that investment.
Right.
So for me, if I was driving around an underprivileged neighborhood, I was looking for the guys that were hanging out, leaning up against their cars, bags of McDonald's, handing food out to all these young kids that were coming in around them. Because the thing is those traffickers and those pimps, they're filling a physical need. And then from there, because if they can fill a physical need of food during the summertime, and if they can fill a physical need of clothing and coats during the winter, then the little grannies that stand out there and that are watching on the streets, that are the eyes and ears, they think they're good. They're taking care of these kids. Like they're feeding them, they're clothing them. And so that's literally how they will go in and groom like an entire neighborhood. And then they'll just start focusing in on those girls or those boys that they know they can get their money back on. Because it is so true. You sell drugs once, you might be able to sell a weapon a couple of times, but you can sell a human multiple times over and over and over in the same night. So one of the things that we did was we identified those areas where the traffickers were, and trying to identify, first of all, who the traffickers were. So looking for those signs, and then also going in and looking for in schools and talking to the kids and educating the kids in schools of what does an abuse of power look like, getting in front of the counselors, working with school counselors to say, this is what human trafficking looks like. And I can give you guys some identifiers, here in a little bit, but this is what it looks like. Do you see anybody like this? And then from there, being in the ears of law enforcement and saying this is where it is. And yes, there was nights when we did midnight outreach, midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the mornings, where I'm knocking on hotel room doors and I'm just, hey, I have bags of free food. And it was those pay by the hour, motels. Sure. And if I can get them to open the door for even 30 seconds to take food from me, I was able to put my eyes in that room, and I could see if it looked like there's a bed and there's 45, year old man and a couple of guys standing out front. And so from there, able to work with law enforcement to send them my location, the details of the cars in the parking lot. And there's one motel actually here in Texas that I went to a lot. The owner started to trust me, and they would call and say, you need to come out here and take a look at room 330 or whatever. Right. On the corner room was drug dealers. They were there every Friday and Saturday night, but they got to know me, and they would come as soon as I pulled up, and they would be like, it's that room over there. We know who they are. And so I was like, okay, wow. So even these criminals have like this level of, we're not crossing that line. And so it was more of a seek and search, and then report, and then step back and let the police come in and do what it was that they needed to do. But it wasn't always immediate. There's intel gathering. You've got to run the plates. You've got to see, because you can catch the little tiny fish, but really at the end of the day, who are the big ones? And so as much as we want those instantaneous results, it's months of crossing every T and dotting every I whenever it comes to those types of operations.
Yeah. One of the statistics that blew my mind when I try to do as much research as I can. And for this one, I did a little bit more than most, because it's not in my lane. I'll just be honest with you. I mean, this is, it just isn't. And, but I wanted to show you respect. Obviously, I wanted to know a little bit. So I did a pretty good amount of research on the topic. Not only that for you, but we're going to have another guest on to talk a little bit more about our area. We have a group, and they're going to talk a little bit about hotspots in our area and how that we can help and stuff like that. But the average individual that is trafficked is 12. That blew me away.
Yep. Yeah. 12. And runaways.
Yeah. Well,
huge.
There was a variety of things. We know that some come from South America, and their parents are hoping that even though the kid is going to go through a lot of despair, that they'll come out of it, like you said, through programs and things like that to, they'll get away from it, but they get conditioned, and it's tough to just think about 12-year-old. And I, we both have kids. We both have had 12-year-olds under our roof, and just the mentality and their mental stability is just not developed yet. And to understand that occurs is tough to swallow. The other statistic, and there's one statistic I want to hold on to, because that one is the most appalling to me, but almost 60% of the population that is trafficked is African American, which I thought stood out to me, because when I think about trafficking, I think about Hispanic population, that demographic, coyotes moving people across the border, and the deals that are made and stuff like that. And so that was one that really stood out to me as well.
Yeah. I think too, what's important to understand is that, um, you know, people, they'll say that, well, it can happen to anyone, and it's happening in your own backyard. And that's kind of the common undertones for human trafficking field. Technically, yes, that's true. Anyone can be the victim of that, just like anybody can be a victim of a violent crime. But there are things that make people way more vulnerable to this, generational trauma, historic oppression, discrimination, other social factors will come into play. And one of the things that happens too is that traffickers will recognize the vulnerabilities of the people that they're honing in on, and they will take advantage of that person. There's a quote that I wanted to tell you guys about. There's a book called The Pimp Game. It's an instructional manual, true story. This is written by a pimp. Okay. Now, I've also been able to sit and talk with traffickers as well. And one told me, I'll stand outside a schoolyard and see who's being picked on, and then decide if I can connect with them in order to gain their trust. And I'll work for 3 or 6 months to gain that kid's trust, knowing that my ROI is going to be worth it. But in the pimp game, it's talking about grooming. And this pimp quote says, "You'll start to dress her, think for her, and own her. If you and your victim are sexually active, slow it down. After sex, take her shopping for one item. Hair and or nails is fine. She'll develop a feeling of accomplishment. The shopping, after a month, will be replaced with cash. The lovemaking turns into raw sex. She'll start to crave the intimacy and will be willing to get back into your good graces. After you have broken her spirit, she has no sense of self-value. Now, pimp, put a price tag on the item you have manufactured." And like, he's telling other pimps like how to traffic their victims, and it's not just girls either. Boys can be victims as well. And that's something that I think they're kind of that silent victim type that people forget, that it's not just females, while a majority is females, but boys can also become victims of trafficking as well. Runaways they'll have survival sex just to survive. And then from that point, they'll connect with usually a trafficker or a pimp because they feel more safe. They break these survivor spirits like nothing I have ever I don't even know if our CIA has come up with these types of, psychological mental games that they play with these victims. It's unbelievable, the trauma that they go through. And a lot of times people are like, well, they know that they're victims of human trafficking, but they don't self-identify as a victim. And that's another myth, is that, people think that they're physically unable to leave their situations, or they're held against their will. And that might be the case, but a lot of times the reasons why they stay is a lot more complicated. Some of them lack just the basic necessities to physically get out. They don't have a place to go. They don't have a car. They don't have a safe place. But some are afraid, for their own safety. If girls have had babies in the midst of this, usually multiple pregnancies, they're only allowed to keep one full term, and that child then becomes collateral.
Yeah.
And it's held, and in order for the safety of their child, they will stay. And then some have just been so effectively manipulated or forcibly hooked on drugs that they literally, they just can't leave. They don't know what they would do if they did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot to take in. Okay.
Yeah.
That I don't have any daughters personally. You do. So, that touches you probably deeper than me. So how do we identify victims, or how do we teach and train potential victims how to possibly steer clear of these situations and or identifying? I know there's a lot of peer groups in high schools now that do teaching and training, maybe, kind of let's band together.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
So one thing, if you're listening to this podcast and you have kids that are young or teenagers or whatever, I just don't live in fear, live in wisdom. I've done this for 15 years and I am not afraid to let my kids go out and be a part of the world or to have cell phones because we have wisdom and we talk about it. And they didn't know what I did when they were young. Funny story to help kind of lighten it a little bit. It was during COVID and everybody was locked down. And my son, who is now 16 at the time, was not. And he was 13 and he was sitting in front of the computer and they were talking about natural disasters. And he was like, well, we lived. And he's like, I didn't live, but my parents went through Hurricane Katrina. And I heard the teacher say, oh, that's really interesting. What else can you tell us about Louisiana? And he said, oh, well, my mom was in the sex industry there. And I was like, no, get off your class. Like literally I had to email the teacher and be like, this is what it was.
Right.
Yeah. Just like, I was like, seriously, like that's where we went. Okay, cool. So, but you don't live in fear, you live in wisdom and you talk to your kids about it. So one of the best things that I can tell anybody is that if your child has a smartphone, great. It's just where we are in society. But smartphones don't equal social media. Just because you have an iPhone doesn't mean you have to have social media. It does not come preloaded with Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, or any of those. Like those are apps that you download. And for the most part, if you give your kid a smartphone, make sure you set up the parental controls. A good out for families is like, look, these things say you have to be 15, 14, 16, or however old. You're not that age. You don't get this. When they do become that age, you don't just download these apps and then let them have free reign. Each one of our kiddos is different. So our two oldest ones, they're both out of high school now. One's out of college. The other one is in college. They were 18 before I said you can have Snapchat. Because I don't have the physical or I don't even have the mental capacity right now to keep up with your stuff. And you have to. I mean, it's not stalking them. It's not like we have to kind of get out of our mind as parents that they need their privacy and they need their space. No, they need boundaries and they need protection is what they need. So let them have these things, but have very open and clear communication about what the expectations are. Have them sign a social media contract and then let them know, I'm doing phone checks. You will be my friend. I will be your friend. I will monitor your Instagram. I will do all of these things. Because honestly, like now the world that we're living in, that is how people are reaching out to these kids. And it comes through the things of, and I get them all the time on my account too, which is so weird. It's like, hey, we need an ambassador for this clothing brand. We liked what you posted. We need an ambassador for this jewelry. What's your address? Where can we send you free products and samples? And it's like, can you imagine like to a teenage girl or to a boy, like that's flattery. Yeah. Like, ooh, they think they like it, And so, and it starts with that because they all want validation with who they are and that they're great and that they're amazing. And so it's having those conversations with them that say, I'm monitoring, your profile is set on private and we're not going to talk to people that we don't know. And if somebody does want to talk to you, I want to be included in that conversation. And they may roll their eyes and be upset, but you can very clearly just say to them, look, here's the reason why. It happened here in Texas, a young girl, young teenager, and you can read about it in the Dallas newspaper, met somebody through social media, went to a basketball game with her dad, decided to meet this person at the bathroom during, the game, said she was going to get concessions, willingly walked out of the American Airlines Center with this person. and then was found in Oklahoma being trafficked. Like, and we think that that doesn't happen, but that happens. Like that happened here. There's been other girls where they've connected with people through Snapchat and social media, and we have found them literally in downtown Fort Worth in a situation that they never thought that they would find themselves in. So talk to your kids, you know, be aware of your surroundings. Again, it's also understanding that in these vulnerable populations that we're also looking for that, you know, and if you're around kids, if you're a human being, you could very easily identify, you know, somebody. But easy ways are, what is the living situation like? Is it in an unstable living situation?
Right.
Is there a lot of turmoil at home? You know, because a lot of times if that's the case, then that validation of love is going to be sought out somewhere else. Is there a history of domestic violence that's going on? Has, you know, does one of the caregivers or family members have a substance abuse issue? Here in Texas, gang trafficking is huge. Here in where I was in Louisiana and the middle and eastern districts between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, family trafficking was big. So parents would keep their kids home from school, sell them during the day in order to support substance abuse issues.
Yeah.
So is there, you know, substance abuse issues that are going on? Runaways, kids that are involved in the juvenile detention center, and justice and foster care systems are highly susceptible to it. What can happen too is, you know, is there a kiddo who, or even not even a kiddo, it can be an adult, that all of a sudden they're being showered with like gifts and money, and they become the object of a very fast moving romantic relationship where it's like a younger, older person or somebody who's really wealthy and somebody who's really struggling connect, and they're getting love bombed, and like all of a sudden it's like just boom, boom, like
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And you're just like, what is going on? What's happening? You know, it could be, and for adults too, because I know of, you know, victims that were 20, 21, 22 years old and ended up, you know, being trafficked because it was a relationship that with the coworker or a student teacher relationship that is just kind of too close. And you're like, that doesn't feel right. And that doesn't set right. Or maybe it's somebody that they only have met only on social media. And all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to go meet this person. For, you know, if there's caregivers or medical personnel that are out there that are listening to this, understand that between 60 and 80% of traffic victims were seen by medical personnel and were misidentified or not identified at all. Because they they maybe didn't know what to look for, or they were not left, like those traffic victims were not left alone with the healthcare provider. So if somebody's always around and controlling, if like that kind of, like that kind of stuff. You know, it also understand too that women can also be the traffickers. So women that want to get out of this lifestyle sometimes are groomed to be the ones to go look for the new girls to replace them. And they can be, it's horrible what they call them, the stable moms. And they can be the ones that are actually controlling the girls because in a demented reality of theirs, they bumped up, you know, when they're out of that lifestyle. So now they're better than everybody else and they're controlling, you know, the other girls too. So,
yeah. Okay. Another layer down.
Layers and layers. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what do you, so you're in Texas. You've been in Texas for a while now, right?
Yeah. Since 2012.
2012. Same for, well, so we moved from Amarillo to here, to East Texas in 2012. So
yes.
Same year.
Same year. Yeah.
Yep. And so what are you doing now?
So now I'm working on the prevention side, in the schools, talking to kids from pre-K, believe it or not, all the way up to high school students.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah. So with our pre-Kers and elementary students, it's more of a it's giving them the ability to tell adults no. And I know that for a lot of people are like, oh, we can't. Yes, they can, because what we want them to do is to understand, one, they have control of their body. So there's safe touch, there's unsafe touch, and there's confusing touch. So we touch on the physical abuse, sexual abuse, and then like what is normal. And giving them the voice to speak up and say, no, I don't like that. And then telling them it's okay to tell another trusted adult what's going on, and being that trusted adult and allowing these kids to come up to us after we've spoken in their classroom and talked to them to disclose. And so with taking in disclosures, you're working with CPS and you're passing on disclosures. So in elementary, pre-Ks are really just kind of giving them their voices to be able to say no. The older elementary students, we really start to talk about social media and gaming etiquette and how to stay safe and what to look for in grooming without actually saying this person's grooming you. Middle school, I know people are like middle school, and I did not like it my first year that I did middle school. I was like, maybe because I had middle schoolers living with me, and I was like, oh my gosh. I love middle school now though, because we talk a lot about bullying, sexual harassment, and healthy relationships, because a lot of these kids, they don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. Right. And again, because they're vulnerable, they're more susceptible at that age because brain development hasn't happened yet. Right. So they're more susceptible to like all of this love bombing and grooming that can go on. And then high school, we talk all about everything from trafficking to date rape to the sexual consent laws in the state of Texas. Yeah. And seniors don't want to hear it, but I'm like, look, y'all are going to college. I'm going to keep you out of jail. Here's what consent is, and this is what the laws are here in this state. So we talk a lot about that in cyber safety as well.
So what does that talk look like? Is it classroom setting? Is it like circled group setting? Is it, because obviously, look, 2 years out of high school, I coached, and it was tough to talk to high schoolers because I know everything. You've had them too. Yeah. And so it's easier to sell them on your ideas and make it their own. So what does that look like? What does it look like to have a conversation with somebody who already knows everything?
It's interesting. It is in the classroom. So you do not want to take this into a huge school assembly where there's 150 kids.
Right.
Like you need the classrooms. And so it might be, I might spend 3 days in a row at the same high school talking to just the science classes at different levels. So freshman, or 4 days, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, in all this. And it's like 8 periods of just rotating through these science classes. So one, it's interesting. Each class is different. Mm-hmm. Kids are going to respond differently. But it's statistics. I like to draw graphs and things on the board. I try to get them engaged. We show videos. We have open discussions. Sometimes they'll sit there and I'll do a whole class and not a kid will say a word. And I'm like, it's not because I just have to know anybody that's on my team. When we go in, we're like, especially for the new trainers that are going in with us, I'm like, it's not your responsibility to get them to engage. Your responsibility is to deliver the stuff. And, case in point, there's times when I've walked out of a class and I'm like, nobody said a word. But then 2 periods later, one of the girls has come back to me and said, I really need to talk to you about what happened. And I'll get a disclosure. And sometimes those disclosures do involve police departments and parents and lawyers, depending on what it is that was said. So it's interesting. And like I said, each class, each school is different. So I'm in some schools where toilet paper is literally chained to the bathroom stalls. Right. I've been in schools where we've had legitimate lockdowns and not lockdown drills. And then I've been in other schools where you walk in and it's like a fireplace is in the lobby and they have their own coffee shop. And I'm like, what is this? Right. But they all need to hear that message across the board. But it is a small, intimate classroom settings, for that. Some schools will divide the boys and the girls.
Sure.
And, and you want to talk about like it, it doesn't faze me. I've got boys, I have girls, well, 2 boys, 2 girls. So for me, going in and talking to a group full of boys about what the consent laws are in the
Sure.
state of Texas, other people are like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, they have to know it. So my personality is I'm just going to tell you, and you can be as uncomfortable as you want. I'm not uncomfortable
Right.
because you guys need to know this. But you're right. Some of them think they know everything and they don't want to listen, but they end up, kind of getting drawn in because they're like, all right, this isn't biology 101. This is something totally different.
Any recent disclosures or past disclosures that were eye opening that you could share with folks that are watching, that maybe somebody that is in a household that there were no symptom signs, things like that, or maybe there was and nobody wanted to address it, or
I know that there's been a couple of, so a lot of ours are still open because these cases take a while.
Sure.
I do know that several years ago, there was one, and the school counselor was like, okay, this will be the third time that somebody's come and that somebody's reported. So a teacher's reported, another student's reported, and now you're in here reporting. And hopefully this now will get CPS rolling and get the ball rolling, in this regard. Another one of my coworkers, she took a disclosure, and it wasn't until 3 years later that she actually got called into court. And so for us, being able to go back in, and so we write everything down and we type everything up and we submit it. And that's why we do that. That's why there's all that paperwork, is because you can go back in and say, okay, this person said this, these are the facts. This is what I did. This is where I reported. One really cool thing is that we were at a school and a girl heard we were doing the talking about date rape. And it was one of those classes that was tough. Nobody really said anything, but a couple of days later called the Women's Center and said, hey, we need to come in for free counseling. My daughter was in one of your classes and told me that she was, date raped, and now where do we go next? And so the calls that we do get from parents where kids maybe don't disclose to us, but they go home and they talk to mom or dad, is amazing, because they're like, we had no idea. Thank you so much. Now we're on the path and the road to healing. Right. Because we don't just go in and set off a bomb and then leave. Like there's where the Women's Center where we're at that does this program, there's free counseling and there's free crisis intervention. And we have a crisis intervention hotline, and we have crisis intervention counselors that are there to come in to stop the bleeding and to help, these victims turn into actual survivors and to move on, into their new life of being able to say, I'm a survivor. This doesn't define who I am.
Right. So moving back to trafficking, one of the statistics that stood out to me, maybe you can expound on it, was shocking to me, was that of the trafficked individuals, only 2% are recovered, like are transitioned back to, normal life. That statistic was appalling to me. And I'm assuming that some of it is due to them not being able to be reprogrammed. Mm-hmm. You just cannot reprogram them. Some of it's due to the effects of drugs and, possible overdose and fatalities that are involved in the trafficking process. And the other part of it is just, frankly, just not being able to connect the dots to get them back. Mm-hmm. Where they end up in a different country, a different city, and you just can't, like, the trail goes cold.
Yeah. So one thing too is to remember that not every traffic victim is going to say, I'm a traffic victim.
Right.
So they're not going to self-identify. Just like every alcoholic is not going to sit down and say, I'm an alcoholic. They're not going to self-identify. So within, outside of that 2%, take into account the ones who don't even identify as victims, or don't realize that they're being trafficked or think that this is just a normal part of life. I know in India, it is normal, especially in Nepal, for parents to sell their girls when their girls are 6 and 7 years old, because that's what happened to them. And these girls just disappear, and then they're gone, and they're in the red light district, never to be seen or found again. And you would literally have to go in and change the entire culture of that region, which people are working to do, but that takes time. And so take that into account, that there's cultures within the world where this is just this is normal. Like, why is this bad? Like, we don't understand why this is bad. And it is, like, to your point, it's the reprogramming, it's the fatalities that come into play. It's being forcibly hooked on drugs. It's feeling, some feel unworthy to get out. I did this. This is my fault that I got into this situation to begin with. Coercion is a very powerful thing. We had a girl that, college student, very well-to-do family, went to a frat party, had her drink roofied, was gang raped, and it was videoed, and then told, if you don't show up and do what we tell you to do when we tell you to do it, with who we tell you to do it with, then we're going to send this to your daddy and to the pastor of your church and to everybody else. And so for 2 years, she lived this double life of going to school, but then also, being a slave in the evening times, because she was so scared of what would happen. And literally, those are the hardest ones, because they blame themselves. If I hadn't have gone, if I hadn't have done this, if I hadn't have done that, then this wouldn't have happened. And it's almost like I deserve to be in this situation, and I deserve for this to happen to me. And it's having to reprogram that mentality, too. Another thing that will contribute to that 2% is that I personally, and, everybody's entitled to their opinion, I personally feel like we do not have long enough sentences for the traffickers whenever they are trafficked. What we've seen with survivors and with safe houses is that they need probably a good 3 to 5 years of intense reprogramming and detox and mental health, physical therapy. They've got to relearn society. And if we're only giving traffickers 18 months, 6 months, or whatever, how are we going to keep the people away from them? How are we going to keep them away from their victims? Because it's like they're going to find them. And it takes a long time for those ties to be broken. So with that 2%, it is that, can we keep their people away? And some of them are just gone overseas, like in villages, and they're just gone. And you just don't see them anymore. And you don't know where they end up.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about prevention with some of the controlling of the social media. Mm-hmm. Are there other ways to prevent trafficking? Obviously you're working on quite a few projects in schools. Are there things that we should focus on or look at for prevention?
Yes. So I think that a really great way for people to just kind of to get involved and to help with prevention is, one, to support those places that are doing prevention. A lot of times in schools, I know here we're fighting right now with the school boards of saying, well, parents need to opt their children into these classes versus opting them out. Before it was like, if you don't want your kid to see this thing about, my kid's school just sent one about fentanyl, like, then opt them out. And I'm like, no, they need to see that, and so making sure that you just understand, like, for us, this isn't sex education. Like, we're literally like preventing, domestic abuse, child abuse, trafficking. So understanding those programs, it's being able for people to just get involved. Everyday ordinary people can make a difference in this. I mean, it's a huge, huge problem. It's global, it's worldwide. You do not have to operate in the realm of, knocking on doors at midnight at hotels and motels. You don't have to be a part of a task force. You don't have to be in prevention at schools. Just ordinary, everyday people can make an impact. And one of the things is just finding out where are the needs in your community and to fill the needs in the community, because the pimps and the traffickers are going to do it. And they're going to do it because they know that they will be trusted and they can start to groom people. So if there's a place in your community that has a food bank and they need food, drop off food. I call them food deserts. So take part in that. Is there an underprivileged area in your community where you feel like maybe they're in need of coats or blankets during the winter time? Then see if you can connect with somebody in your community that's providing that for them. It's finding the needs in the community and then saying, how can I help with that need in order to make sure that somebody else that has nefarious intention is not filling that need.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. We covered a lot of ground very quick.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome information. We're gonna add some links to when we post the podcast. We'll add a ton of links that people can go to. Are there any websites or nonprofits that you can talk about just off the top of the head that you'd want people to go to kind of support these initiatives and or more education?
Yes. So Polaris Project.
Okay.
You guys check them out. They are going to have so much information and they break it down state by state. So if you're in Iowa and you want to see what trafficking looks like in Iowa, you got to check out Polaris Project. They are absolutely amazing. Atlas Free is another one of my favorite nonprofits because literally they support other nonprofits. So how cool is it that it is a nonprofit that raises funds for other nonprofits that are involved in anti-trafficking all over the world? That's why it's called Atlas, and so they provide support and funding to partners everywhere. So they are amazing. They're called Atlas Free. And then the human trafficking hotline is another one that people really need to get on there. So humantraffickinghotline.org. And I know you're going to toss that down in the show notes too. If you're local here in Texas, I love the organization called Unbound. Now they are amazing. And then Refuge for Women is also working on safe housing for women. And they're not only here in the DFW area, but they do have other safe homes throughout the United States as well.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just something that we don't think about a lot. I mean, right. we're blessed, and obviously you've done a lot more work than I have. But again, whenever I thought about launching this, is one of the first things I thought about. It's a heavy topic. Yeah. It is, but it's one that needs we need to shine light to. And I'm so glad that you were able to come on and add some detail and a lot of good information. We're going to add a ton of links for folks to look at and contribute to if they want to. But at the end of the day, I mean, it could affect us all. And I think that we've got to pay a close eye to it. 7% of the folks that are trafficked are male. So it's not as though boys can't be influenced either. So I think that's another statistic that stood out to me too, is that they can be influenced the same way. And we think of it like, oh, well, they're going to be pushing drugs. They're going to be, gang banging and stuff like that. No, they're trafficked. Same way, like you were referring to earlier.
That's right.
Very
and
cool. Go ahead.
So, well, before we sign off, I know this can be so overwhelming and it can be really, really heavy. Sure. And so if everybody just can remember the starfish mentality, like that's how those of us that work in just any of the realms of even nonprofits in general, like we really have to take the starfish mentality. And it is just the story of the little boy walking down the beach after a storm, and all these starfish had washed up onto the shore, and he's picking them up one by one and he's throwing them back in. And this old man comes out and says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm saving the starfish." And the old man looks down the beach and he's like, "There are thousands of starfish on this beach. You are not going to be able to save everyone." And he picked up one starfish and he said, "But I can save this one." And he tossed it back in the ocean. And so that's really how we have to look at this. If we try to look at the overall global issues of it, it can be overwhelming. But if you're interested in getting involved and in helping, just focus on that one. What is that one thing that I can do? How can I help in that one way? Can I be a graphic artist and do stuff for free for nonprofits? Because Lord knows we're not very good at that kind of stuff. Am I great at fundraising? Can I help do fundraising? Can I sell baked goods? Am I a mom that stays home and I can just, make phone calls or do data entry? What can I do to help save that one? And I think if we can keep the starfish mentality in front of us, it keeps it from being super incredibly overwhelming.
So what I was going to transition to is Spellingly Strong Beauty.
Yes.
I mean, so you're the founder of that Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that page, because when I go there, I'm like, as a guy, I'm like, oh man, this is intense. There's a lot going on, women style.
Yeah. So I've got Stunningly Strong Beauty page, which is like all beauty products. And then I have our Stunningly Strong group. And the Stunningly Strong Facebook group, there's about 540 some women that are all there.
It's impressive.
Thank you. It was just birthed from this place of women needing community and to champion each other. I am all about not competing with other women. And so it's a platform for women to come together and to share ideas, to give their thoughts, to have in-depth discussions and conversations, or to just say, you know what, I need some encouragement today. I'm feeling really low, or I had a really awful mom moment. And it's just beautiful to see all these women jump in and be like, hey, me too. Like, this is what happened to me. And to just really be able to encourage each other. So if you're a woman, I invite you to join. If you're a man, you will probably not like it at all because we talk a lot on Mondays that we do Monday Moments, which is just an encouragement, type thing. Faith is really strong in my life. And so I like to share from that cup. But then coming up, we've got 12 days of Christmas that is about to hit the airways. So it's going to be 12 days of recipes and decor tips and decorating and fashion and all of that fun, amazing stuff. So would love to have you be a part. And that's the Stunningly Strong Facebook community.
So I'm going to share a non-known thing. Even my wife doesn't know this. So 80% of my staff is female. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have a staff of 60. So that makes up to about 45 to 50 individuals that are female. And in the capacities that I've held, that has been pretty much the status quo. Has been about 60 to 80% of my staff has been female. And I have a sister too. So thankfully I was raised with a sibling of another gender, which was awesome. Well, it wasn't awesome when I was growing up, but it is what it is. So anyway, I jump on your page every now and again to just ground me some, because us as guys, we have this like fix it mentality where we just have to fix everything, or we have to know everything about everything, or we just have to be assertive, even if we don't know what the heck we're doing. So we just have to act like we know what we're doing. And so sometimes I jump on there just to kind of like say, okay, this is the struggle, or this is, and the sounds of encouragement is great, but just the vulnerability, hearing the vulnerability of like challenges of being a mom, challenges of setbacks, of maybe of verbally being abused or whatever it is, that adjusts my approach sometimes when I'm talking to one of my employees that's 22 years old that I know comes from a broken home. that, so I mean, what I'm saying is this: it. I understand that it's a page that's targeted to a certain demographic, but occasionally I do visit to gain some reference and to get some humbleness and some softness to my delivery because I need it. And what other references do you go to? I'm not gonna get that from a book. I'm not gonna get that from. I'm probably not gonna get that from a peer, even if it appears female. They're probably their motivations and their everything's probably similar to me. Their conversations are probably going to sound slightly different, but I think that going to those sources kind of gives me a little more like realness. It's real.
Yeah.
People are putting their emotions out there. It's vulnerability. It's realness. It's encouragement. It's a lot of great things happening on that page, and so I pop in there without you knowing me.
No problem. Toby pops in every now and then, and because I have a blog as well, and I had kind of put it down for the past year, and I've just picked it back up again, and so it's stunninglystrong.com if anybody wants to check that out. But every now and then he'll be like, "Hey, that blog post was really good. I just read that." I was like, "Oh, thanks." Or I'll come into the bedroom and I hear myself and he's watching like a Monday moment, you know. But I'm really big, and the whole reason why it was just founded is because Beauty for Ashes, like even me personally, like I found myself in the midst of just like burning down the world, and it's my fault. And I think that stories that we hear the end of, they're great and encouraging and amazing, are wonderful. But I think that we gain more strength and encouragement from hearing about the struggles that the person went through to get to that point. And so there's times when I'm like, look, y'all, this day sucked. It was hard. It was awful. I'm not where I need to be. I'm not where I want to go. There's been setback after setback after setback, but I'm here. And I've encouraged other women, and the stories that I've written about the other women that have been on there too, that are on the blog, have just been, you know, it doesn't have to be wrapped up in a neat little bow. Like what is your life like right now at this moment? Because I can guarantee you that what you're walking through, you're going to look back at some point and you're going to tell somebody else like, "Hey sister, guess what? I got you. Grab a hold to my lifeline and I'm going to pull you through, you know, the next place." So, but I'm glad that you hop on there and observe quietly.
my favorite is like somebody puts like they're having a bad morning, or that their kid, you know, struggling this, that, and the other, and all these women are just like, no, you're not gonna let yourself get down, you know, no, we went through that, you know, and this is what happened. And it's just they really rally to each other strongly in that forum, and I applaud you to creating that forum for them. And I know there's a lot of strength that they're deriving from that, and they're stronger people from it. So it's cool. I jump in, I get my strength, my female juju, and then I go about my business, and I just hope that my employees, I know my employees know, because like today was a perfect example. I had a female employee disclose to me today that a former supervisor made some inappropriate remarks, and they did it on Snapchat because that forum, you know, earns the messages within 24 hours. So she didn't snap a message of it. This was a couple years ago. She didn't have the confidence to disclose it to anybody. She sees me as a fatherly figure because I'm 20 years older than her. So I'm talking to her. She mumbles something under her breath. I pick up on it. I confront her about it because I don't want it to just go without happening. And she discloses what happened, and I'm appalled. And so I report it to HR, and of course they're just like, happened a couple of years ago. Individual still employed, so it's still an open investigation. Right. But the fact is I don't know if I would have done that 5 years ago. I don't think I would have. I would have heard the murmur under her voice and just would have went on. But through, exposure to, different forums like yourselves, like your stunningly strong beauty page. I mean, those types of things are things we got to pick up on.
Right. Right.
And I think I'm better educated from that type of forum and forums like that. So cool. All right. So this is the segment where we do shout outs. It's my favorite part. Well, it's not my favorite part, but I mean, it's still one of my favorite parts because in podcasts, you really don't get to do that. But
yeah,
I love it because it's like your opportunity to kind of talk about some people that maybe have influenced you to do what you do, give you purpose. I'm not going to put any words in your mouth because I can kind of maybe guess a couple folks, but nonetheless, I'm gonna leave it up to you. Kind of talk a little bit of some of that.
Well, shout out to you for the podcast and for, doing this. And of course, I was going to shout out to my husband, Toby. He is an amazing, strong guy to have to put up with all of this, because sometimes it is full tilt, 100 miles an hour. And he is just that. I'm the kite and he's the string and the person that holds it, that grounds me. So he is amazing.
And we have
awesome.
Right beside each other.
Yeah, right beside each other. Yes.
And we're both hard-headed but loyal. That's
very much.
Yeah, so it's awesome.
Very much.
He texts me on my birthday. I text him on his birthday.
Yeah,
it's kind of our thing.
It is, and the cool thing too is like you, he's a fixer, so he learns now to ask me, "Do you want me to fix this, or do you just want me to listen?" Or I'll start the whole conversation with, "Don't fix this. Just listen to me." So shout out to that guy because he is amazing. Of course, my 4 incredible kids who, they're all awesome, functioning, kind adults. 2 of them are adults, and I've got 2 still in school, and love them. Like they're amazing, great kids, and so much fun to just see different stages of their lives now. And we're at the place where everybody sleeps in on Saturday mornings, so. That is amazing. I also want to shout out my friend Tara. She is a victim. She's a survivor of domestic violence and trafficking, and she's a huge advocate right now for trafficking victims and domestic violence. Her name is Tara Alston. She has a book called "Yet Still I Stand." You can find her on Facebook. I also feature her in Stunningly Strong as a Stunningly Strong Woman of the Month on my blog, and so she is just incredible. I love her story so much. I've known her for years. I mean, since we were in high school, and to see going from one to the other to now, she's just this incredible force of nature for survivors. Absolutely love and adore her. And of course, to every person that believed in me from the very beginning, from the people at Trafficking Hope that said, "Can you do the task force?" to the People Rescue Her that gave me the opportunity to be the domestic outreach director. And then, of course, shout out to the Women's Center of Tarrant County, who are just incredible people that I can't say enough good things about them. They're all amazing. And I love it. And to every person that is in this realm that's fighting it, and to every survivor that is out there, and to any person that is in the thick of it, you are amazing and incredible individuals. And for those of you that are looking for a way out, I'm praying that you find the strength and the resources to get out. And for those of you that are surviving, may your voice be the stepping stone for the others to follow behind you.
Very cool. Really appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man.
I love it.
It's so good. I do have a quick shout out, and then we'll sign off. During the last week and a half, as I said in the beginning, I traveled to Guadalajara, and we went into Topicapi, and then we went to Tequila. And I was there for an industry trip, but man, so I was there during Dia de los Muertos, so it was Day of the Dead. And similar to what we have, like 4th of July, MLK Day, Columbus Day, like the people of Mexico really show a lot of reverence to their ancestry, and more than what we do, in my opinion. Like I
Right.
think that we celebrate like former birthdays, and we celebrate like certain milestones that maybe our ancestry hit, 50 years of marriage or whatever it may be. But these are people that are not with us anymore. And
Right.
I had lunch in a cemetery. We had festivals in cemeteries. They cleaned the graves. They decorated the graves. There were people camped out in chairs telling stories about their ancestry. It's just not the same. It's just
Right.
not the same. So I wanted to shout out to Gramps. I know you call
Yeah.
him something different. He was an
Oh,
awesome man. I remember having many conversations with him. He was just such an intellectual,
yeah.
and inspired me to do a lot more
Hmm.
with what I had going on than what I thought I could achieve. My mom and dad, they were awesome. My grandmother was a librarian, and my grandfather was a bailiff, and he was, man, hard. I always think of him. One of the first memories of him was that old John Wayne video where he asked the boy, he's like, "Can you swim?" And he goes, "No, I can't." He just throws them into the water.
There's
That's what happened to me. I was wearing diapers, and my grandfather asked me, he's like, "Can you swim?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "All right, you're going in the horse or the cow." And I just threw me in there, and I remember touching the sides, and it was algae all on the sides, and I was afraid. But I swear,
yeah.
um, that ancestry can't leave with us. It just can't.
Right.
We have to pass it on, and that was
Yeah.
something strongly that I brought back from Guadalajara, which is absolutely amazing zone of Mexico. It's very safe. If you ever get an opportunity to travel there, you definitely want to.
For sure.
Thanks so much, Gina, for coming on.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming on and sharing it so much. This is great information for us. This is not something
Awesome.
that anybody probably ever prepared us to cover in this type of podcast, but I'm glad to bring it to them. Glad you were available to do it as a family member. Appreciate what you do day in and day out.
Absolutely.
And I know that you're touching a lot of people. This is episode 1 of 2 or of the series,
Awesome.
human trafficking. We're gonna have some folks on for the silent. That's our group here in the Tyler zone. I didn't know if you knew this, but Arizona, California, and Texas are the 3 states that are most trafficked, the most trafficked humans in the United States. And obviously, they're worldwide happens, but in the United States, those 3 border states, obviously, it's just a lot easier for them to cross over. But those 3 states are so. For the silent, we're going to have some folks on for that, and looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Gina. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right, we're going to sign off. Thanks.